Welcome to the Motivation. I'm Lori Joy.
And I'm Chrissy Van. Inspired by the motorcycle community, we dive into raw and honest conversations,
helping you navigate this wild ride we call life. This is your motivation.
Just like riding a motorcycle, life requires us to manage our fuel wisely. When you're out on the road, it's easy to focus on the destination, pushing forward without realizing your tank's running low until you're suddenly out of gas. Today, we're diving into burnout, how to recognize when your energy is depleting, how to prioritize self-preservation, set boundaries, and understand the ripple effects this can have on all areas of your life. We're going to explore ways to restore your balance, set firm boundaries, and protect your energy reserves so you can refuel and keep moving forward without hitting empty. Before we hit the road, be sure to hit like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram at the Motovation Podcast. For small creators like us, reviews are like fuel, and your support keeps us going strong. So please drop us a review or a rating if you're enjoying the ride. This is the Motovation.
So if you've listened to episodes prior to this, it was about Chrissy almost a year ago. It would have been, I think we recorded end of November-ish, December, and it went up in January. And the episode was called Clearing the Visor, Finding Clarity in Life's Chaos. And the reason we did that episode way back when was because I was really in a space of burnout and I was just coming out of it. And I was speaking to all the different signs, things like irritability, feeling like sleep was off, feeling chaotic inside, feeling that like almost like that helpless feeling in it all. And it ended up being massive for myself 10 months later, because what I said in that episode at one point or another, I'm sure of it, was there was signs and I kind of ignored them. I ignored the whispers. I ignored the like louder little nudges. And then I felt quite unwell and was just, like I said, coming out of it by doing all the things that I should have done when there was the whisper. And I think anybody that's listening to this episode that we're going to be talking about listening to the whispers and what does that actually look like and how hard it actually really is. Because it's not just the listening to the whispers. There's a reason we ignore the whispers because it's hard. It's hard to make those adjustments and those changes, especially when the world at every given second seems to be vying for our time and our energy and our attention. There's big money. There's big payoffs in our time and our attention. We've seen that in flooded when it comes to like online presence, right? And everything and advertisements and the dings and the bings for dopamine hits and all the things. But I've spoken of this before on just kind of lightly about being back in school and working and podcasting. We took a little bit of break over the summertime, but we are doing it at the start. And I'm 6 months in, and it was a lot, to say the least. Sleep was off. You guys got to experience my forgetfulness and like little like glitches and all the things. But it was at the very beginning. And so there was, you've got more energy at the beginning when you start an endeavor like that. And as the months went on, like anything, if you don't make the proper adjustments, it's not sustainable. And that's what I started to run into is feeling like, oof, like I don't have quite the same kind of momentum with it all. And I was still just as excited and committed and all those things. But I was noticing more and more a lot of the signs of burnout, but going, well, what am I to do? Like, what do you do? In my head at that time was like, well, I just gotta I knew it was going to be like this. And yes, I knew it was going to be challenging. Yeah, I knew I'd be exhausted. Okay, yeah. But all of a sudden this episode, it was about middle of August is when I really started to really notice, or even I'd say actually beginning of August, I could really hear the whispers of like, something's got to change here. You're running on fumes. You're starting to run on fumes. I felt it in a way where I was like very disconnected from myself. And I was like, oh, and I remembered this episode. And I remember saying, I wish I would have listened earlier. Mm-hmm. And so it was that, are you going to listen earlier then? are you going to take that knowledge and actually make it applicable? Are you going to do something about this? Because the reality of it is that I wasn't going to get more time in the day. That's finite. And your energy is finite. So I wasn't going to suddenly drastically get energy. And so it really had to do with this, all of a sudden, this like real stark presence of like, you've got to figure this out. And so as I was going with you guys to our friends to Seattle, we were doing this run. I don't run. I had been running for 2 months at 6 a.m. to prepare for this thing. I had my neon outfit
program.
I had a training program. Talk about like not having time. And I was like, okay, we're running. I had a neon outfit. I tracked down a marketplace. Like I was packed. So everything was moving in that direction of like, well, of course, that's what I'm doing. This is the plan. This is this is the that. And it was so loud. It was so loud in my ears of like this voice being like, stop. And it was like, well, but, and it was that like, why am I arguing with my internal self that's trying to look out for me? Like, who am I fighting against here? What is happening? And so it was one of those things that I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm tired, really tired in this moment in time. You know, I communicated to you guys ahead of time, like, I don't know what this looks like, but this is a real reality that I'm not going to be going. But I also was like, let me just get my bearings. And I think that's the other thing too, is we kind of are like, let me just get my bearings and then I'll continue on this treadmill.
Yeah.
And then so I got my bearings, and in just regards to like just a bare minimum feeling of that I had my sanity.
And to like reverse a little bit, because I recall this time period for you, Lori tried to get her bearings by going on a peaceful camping trip in the forest and instead ended up next to a loud group site, which did not really cater to I'm going to get my bearings in the nature in the forest. So there were intentions that were happening and you got a little sidelined and roadblocked, which ultimately put the onus on you to actually be like, how am I going to structure this? Because I can see where I'm headed.
Yeah. And I felt like I couldn't hear myself. Here's the other thing is like what I do for a living is I hear everybody's challenges throughout the day. I'm taking it in. I'm taking the puzzle pieces of it all, forming a picture of it, emotionally holding space for people, driving to the next destination, doing the same thing of like percolating on all the things. Right. And then I'm studying about these types of things. And so I'm just saturated in other people's experiences. And I was finding that I also, not only was I on the cusp of exhaustion and burnout, I was also having a really hard time hearing myself. And I work very, very hard to create space to hear myself, to hear what I think, to hear what I feel. And I was just like, I can't hear it. I can't hear it. And so there was this constant kind of pull factor of get quiet, thus the forest, thus, and not quiet. Not as much quiet as I anticipated anyways. So I started doing little things where I would just like sit quietly on the balcony with my noise canceling headphones after work. And I was creating little pockets and spaces. And I was thinking, I just got to get through this next like month. If I could just get through this next month. And then it occurred to me that I was like, that's kind of like that idea of like, I'll be happy when. And it really hit me over this last like week and a half, actually 2 weeks. And we planned on doing this episode actually before that, because I was like, oh, we should talk about this, because I've not only are the families that I work with feeling that they're in a constant state of like precipice of exhaustion and burnout, or actually in burnout. And I'm watching people, my friends, family, like I'm watching, this isn't a me story. This is an all of us story in one way or the other in some capacity.
Especially this time of year when people are plugging back into those routines, like it becomes a tidal wave of responsibilities all of a sudden on top of a momentum that was at a fever pitch.
Yeah. Right. And everyone's just like vying for this need for just slowing down, kind of like, recovering, recouping. And when I had that thought of like, I'll be rested when, I'll hear myself when. And it's one of the things that was one of the biggest life lessons I learned years back was that idea of I'll be happy when is a farce. And it's a very, very dangerous lie that we are under the understanding of. It's like, if you can't find happiness in today, you will never find it. If you can't find a
Without
peace, a
question.
joy, it will not come. It is like, because you are training your brain also in and around that state. And all of a sudden it really hit me that I was like, with this schedule, yes, under all the circumstances, it is pretty outrageous at the moment because there's so many moving parts. But that said, I've got some big ass dreams in my life, and I have no idea what that's going to demand of me. And it was all of a sudden this reality of like, if you don't utilize this opportunity to get real clear and real practice at recognizing of how, if time and energy is finite, where and how are you spending it in any given moment, and start to get really curious and aware of your participation. And that doesn't mean alienating or shutting down or shutting off or completely, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But it was almost like an elimination diet where I had to peel everything back. And so I first was like, I just need to hear myself. And again, my schedule doesn't allow a lot of time for that. So one of the only areas that not one of them, but one of the bigger areas that I could create that space was I had to go to all of my close friends and be like, I got to peace out for a little bit. And that's all well and fine to say. And I have also, keep in mind, I've got a crew that's like, you do you, we support you in that, we get it, right on, do your thing. We're here whenever or however you need, when you need. But even that said, when you're in relationships consistently with anybody and you change the dynamic, it doesn't matter who you are or how supportive you are, that affects how people feel.
The first thing I said to Lori actually is because she sent me this epic voice note. And as we do, we joke all the time. We're like, here's your podcast. Because our intentions are always like quick 30 seconds. And then the voice note's 4 or 5 minutes long. Yes. And she's going on this whole thing of like, this is happening in my life, da, da, da. And then finally at the end, it rounds the bend of the game plan here of like, I just need to kind of power down, focus on myself, etc. And I wrote her and I said, I listened to most of that being like, is she breaking up with me?
Yeah, she did. I was like, no, dude.
Being like, it's been great, but we're done.
It's been nice, but this is where it ends. Yeah. This is where we call it.
I mean, if you were going to break up with me, I would hope it would be in podcast format. It would just be fitting.
I'd be like, we're going to do an episode on breakups. And then imagine.
Here's your motivation maintenance. We're done.
Yeah.
It's over. But no,
you do it really publicly.
To her because if you followed us on the journey as well, it was for me this time last year, coming off the heels of the Women's Moto Summit, where I really dug into my vulnerability journey, which again, if you followed us, God, such foreshadowing in life to set the stage, to be prepared for all the things and also allow things to come in as I've done all this deep self-work. However, I was in a state of overwhelm, and a lot of that very self-created. I was still dedicating a lot of mental energy and anxieties over my career life and pressure of perfectionism that I was still trying to break down. And so my mental capacity, there was so much tension there because I was giving attention to things and feeding things in my life that weren't really necessarily beneficial to my overall well-being. And I did the exact same thing. And I was like, I have to power down to some degree. And I actually utilized your space, Lori and Dave's, because they were in Saskatchewan. And I went there and I just painted and went so inward so I could hear myself. Because that mental chatter that I was having leading into that, there was no space for that self to actually say, hey, we're in here and we're actually working on a little reconstruction project inside. Care to participate? And until you actually quiet down, it's really the only time you can say, oh, yes, I need to do this work. But how can you possibly do this work if you're living your day to day in the exact same facet that you were previously? And so as soon as Lori wrote me this, I mean, aside from the "Are you breaking up with me?"
Yeah.
humor,
Yeah.
I then said, I was like, yes, I was like 100%. And you had said, things are going to be really different in how you communicate via text and all the rest
Mhm.
of it. And I was like, I see you in that. I know. And I don't have your mind's eye for your dreams and vision, but I know your incredible capabilities that those dreams and visions are going to be a reality. And if this is what you need to ensure that you stay whole and listening to what you need to do, fuck yes, lean into that. But as a friend, to your point, the dynamics have shifted. And it's been an interesting time for me because I have so much newness happening in my life. And it's funny because a bunch of people at the same time are in a similar boat as Lori. And I was like, I'm going to have to, I don't even know how to catch people up at this point. Luckily, I'm in a really great mental space. So
Oh.
it's fabulous. But I'm just like, the communication's so appreciated as well, because when you're going to set a boundary in your life or adjust your dynamic with people in your life, if Lori had decided, I mean, our relationship's so good, so I know a conversation would have happened regardless, even if she hadn't addressed it out of the gate. But her being proactive and saying, this is the space I'm entering. This is where I see my relationships within this space. This is the why. This is what I'm going to get from it. To me as a friend, the only response is a fucking hell yes. And my well-being and feelings within our relationship were not poorly affected in any capacity. Like there's a mutual understanding of where we're navigating in this season of life. And I have such deep respect. I mean, as I say, as I started that, I was like, if Lori hadn't done that and just went in and our relationship dynamic changed, we have a strong enough communication level, I would have addressed that personally at some point, and not defensively either, just that noticing like there's a shift here, and we would chat. But I had such mad respect that you were like, yeah, this is where I'm at. And to be honest, before you got there, because you had actually said some breadcrumbs of like, I feel this taking over, and you were trying, point in case, the camping and this, that, being like, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm feeling this way, but I could sense that inner tension that was starting to build. And so to me as a friend as well, I'm like, I'm so happy that you're listening to that and taking care of yourself, because no one's good to anyone else nor themselves if they allow themselves to, just like we started the episode, what the fuck are you going to do on your bike with an empty gas tank? A human is going to operate in the same way.
And there's such that demand, right? We've got that demand on us, that those expectations that are, especially because we are so tethered now to social media in so many ways. So we're seeing all these other people doing and being and achieving and giving and and their highlight reels and stuff. And so not only is there already that societal expectation that you should identify as all these things, therefore show up for everybody everywhere at all times, but then obviously with that internet world, it puts it on steroids, right? And so there's also that parts of ourselves that say, well, I can't because people need me. And yes, but you can't not because people need you. Because if you aren't giving yours to yourself and you're not filling and listening and filling your cup, you don't actually have anything to pour. And not only that, but like what ends up happening is we end up showing from a space and place of survival rather than actual prefrontal cortex, creativity, imagination, connection, all those different things. We're showing up from a place of, I'm just going to be there for them because I'm afraid to not be, of any value, or I'm afraid that they'll be on their own, or they'll all those things, like you're their savior or something like that. Like their well-being is reliant on you. And if it is, that's a real problem. That's codependency. And there's a real issue there. Like if that person is genuinely emotionally dependent on you, that is a really, really, that's something to look at. That's actually good to actually excavate and uncover in the wanting to create space and boundaries when you need to. But the thing of it really is you're not even able to understand or recognize because you're depleted. You're not in your higher state of consciousness. And so you're not able to be really of help. So you'll start projecting or your own stuff onto them, or you'll start making it personal, or you'll need them to be a certain way, or you'll show up for them in a way you have no business showing up for. You can actually end up interrupting their growth because you're trying to swoop in as a savior or a fixer or a giver, that you actually end up blocking what's meant to come in from them of sitting in it or being in it or whatever it is. But you can't even listen to those parts of yourself if you're in this constant state of, I got to be here, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this. And that's where it really becomes difficult as well, because even with the relationships that I have in my life, that they understand it, and that they're, like I said, when you have any relational change, especially for people, like I've got a handful of my friends right now that are going through some really difficult emotional states. And these are people that I have a role in being a part of the navigation system. I'm not the navigation system, but I'm a cog in the wheel. And I've had to say, I can't be a cog in the wheel. Or like I will be a little bit of oil or grease or whatever helps the wheel in intermittent but that, now here's the thing, that's easy to say. And I know that with every fiber of my being, while I'm listening, I know that is what I'm supposed to be doing, is solely focusing on filling my tank right now because I'm at depletion. Now, when those moments come in though, of those people you've seen struggling or the things, and your pattern and your relational pattern is to show up in a certain way, you are going to have a visceral reaction to that. And some of my work has actually been sitting in it, not going, well, I've got to, take care of me, and sitting in a hot bubble bath. I'm sitting in a hot bubble bath feeling sick to my stomach, because the voices in my head are going, what are you doing? Do this, do that, make the phone call, show up, or go to the, fly home. This person needs you at home. It's $100, like all these things. And now that doesn't mean that I was doing anything unhealthy when I was doing those things. In many ways, that is what I've been always working on boundaries for many years. This is not new to me. But in this regard of creating boundaries where I'm needing it in such a drastic sense of the word, or in the sense of the boundary, is that I'm like, this is important work too, is me being able to sit with that feeling and know that they're going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And this is just a very uncomfortable feeling. And it's to the point where some of the nights it's woke me up, and I've also then realized because I know that I do. I've always known that I do, but I'm like, oh, this is the next evolution. This is the next evolution of how much are you identifying of your role as the helper, as the giver, as the thing. Now, again, I'm never going to change. That's my role in this life. That I came into this world being, that's one of my roles. I do it for a living. I do it as a friend. It's who I fundamentally, intrinsically, my soul is. Now, again, in order to do that on the scale that I'm looking to do in this world, I've got to get clearer and clearer and clearer as the road goes of where and how I participate and when I participate. And that's not always going to feel good for everybody involved, including myself. But it is, I really, really believe this in like my core, that's imperative to being a whole well-being, and that it will look different at different times in our lives. And it's not about getting it. It's not like you're like, I've got it. Now that's that. It will change and it will evolve. But if we're not getting very clear on how to care for ourselves and be very conscious of our time and our energy in a day, even down to nutrition, exercise, water intake, your fundamentals, like that was the first thing I put into before I did anything else, because it doesn't matter what you do. If your fundamentals of your machine's not working, if you're not putting gas in the tank, it doesn't matter your paint job. It doesn't matter the beautiful leather seat you got on there. It doesn't matter how badass your outfit is. Your ass is on the side of the highway. You are going nowhere, seeing nothing.
I have to say, like, to pause you there on that fuel part, because
please
it just
do
makes me think of even when my life derailed.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what helped me move through day to day to day to day, is like those foundations. And so I just wanted to like pause you and just highlight even further, because those aren't actually hard to implement, but when you are in it, they are hard to implement. There is a choice, right? So it's easier to order the DoorDash than it is to make yourself the nutritious food, but it's like the choose your hard moments, because if you build that foundation, then you can stack. If you stack on a shaky foundation, you're going to end up fucked.
Yeah. And two, like that's been the thing. As soon as I started to implement that, it was that much more easy to hear myself. I could hear myself again. Even going back, I was just back in Saskatchewan again. And I, no matter what time, because my sleep is so imperative, all of our sleep is imperative, but I'm pretty regimented around it. And there was just some like things that happened that, you're at family members' places, and my uncle loves to, I kid you not, this is back home, Saskatchewan. I just love it. My uncle at the farm, I think it was about midnight, and I wake up to this rumble, and I'm like, what's happening? We're in the middle. We're on the farm. What is happening? It's my uncle watching old school tractors on YouTube next to my bedroom.
That is the
I kid you
shit
not.
I've ever heard in my life.
I loved it. Amazing. I was like, my uncle's he's a goddamn legend. He's a goddamn legend. I love my Uncle Grant. And so there was things like that happened, but I still woke up before that sun came up, got my boots on, got my big coat on, I think it was like 3 degrees out, and walked the farm to the sunrise, because that is something that fuels me. And I know that if I start my day watching the sunrise, my day will be that much better for it. So I think that's where we kind of like, I think this is a good turn to take in regards to like, what are some of the things like to notice of like, because you're like, well, how do I know? How do I know if I'm just tired on the precipice of burnout? If like, how will I know if I'm really burnt out?
I let in, and then I was like, I don't really know if that is the song.
Yeah.
Are these tools like
no.
singing tools? Okay, perfect.
No, not yet.
Never mind.
Soon though.
Never mind.
Because it's like, we're talking a lot about the like, hear yourself, and we'll talk, and then we will get more into like, well, what can you do? But like the awareness is the first thing, because here's the thing. We have normalized chronic stress. I want to be so clear on this. We have normalized chronic stress. It is not normal. If you normalize it, you will unintentionally make yourself exceptionally ill. Your body manifests this stuff, this stress, this cortisol should not be running through you at the rate it is running through us in these states. And that is part of what these physical, mental, all these signs within yourself. And so like things like physical, like if you're constantly tired, no matter what your sleep, like if you're just feeling like I'm just constantly exhausted throughout my day, you shouldn't feel constantly exhausted throughout your day and no matter what kind of thing, right? Like, yes, you feel tired. You have tired moments, but that constant fatigue, this is a big sign. Headaches, muscle tension, sleep issues, whether it's having a hard time ruminating thoughts, going to sleep, waking up in the night. Like that's one of my big signs. I'll wake up at 3 a.m. because like I'm a zonker. Like I fall asleep fast. I wake up when the alarm goes off.
Phone. We have addressed this before, but my phone, when it does those highlight reels to music, there are ones that are just Lori sleeping, which makes me sound creepy, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah. I have a sleep disorder, so that doesn't help the whole burnout thing. But that's also it of like, hey, that's because I sleep all the time is what the thing is. But I don't, because I've helped myself. So I do and I don't. I don't consider myself not really.
Before you wreck yourself.
That's exactly it. So sleep, weaken immune system. If you're finding getting a lot of colds or you're getting sick often, your immune system's weak because it's having to work overtime, especially with cortisol levels and all those different things. Your emotional state. If you find you're really irritable, people that you normally wouldn't be irritable with, suddenly you're just like, yeah, things are saying just annoying, like it's because your brain is in going into more of a fight, flight, or freeze state. And so it's noticing and thinking everyone's a bit of a threat. So you're going to have a negativity bias as well. That's also it. If you're thinking more negative thoughts than usual, you're more cynical, you're a little bit more pessimistic than usual. It's your brain going into more of a survival state, and it's going to play up the negativity bias. Also, again, just in case I'm going to make you a threat. How do I make you a threat? Annoying as fuck. You know? That's what it's going to do. Feeling like that helplessness, like this will never end. And like, I just feel like I can't make it through a day. I wake up every day and here we go again, fucking tired, fucking exhausted, people wanting something from me, demands of me, and I just can't do enough. So that helplessness. And also questioning your capabilities. Why do they look like they're able to do life and I'm just like being swallowed up by mine? What do they know that I don't know? That feeling, but like not just a one over, but feeling it on a constant. Difficulty concentrating, right? You feel like you're just like, I can't even think straight. Why am I even here in this kitchen? Like we have those the odd time, but if that's consistent and consecutive, that's signs. Forgetfulness, behavioral procrastination. It's just like again, it comes down to like overwhelm and your body just goes, I'm going to do things that I feel capable of. I'm going to fold that thing that doesn't actually need to be folded right now and leave that work thing that needs to be done in the next hour till tomorrow. Like we'll do all the things that just convince us that we're capable because we're just so desperate to not feel what we're feeling or do one more hard thing. So we'll deep dive to procrastination, right? Withdrawing with responsibilities or from people. You'll find that you're just like, I just can't take one more thing. So I'm going to avoid people. Isolation. Isolation, just like withdrawing from activities that you wanted to do and all those things. That was where that was like, just go quiet, just go quiet. Now I did chosen isolation and I've been doing chosen isolation, but that's because of the pre-work that I was doing. I know that's how I work best is going quiet. And isolation like Chrissy spoke, she's the same. Yeah. Isolation with intention. Exactly. So these things in and themselves aren't necessarily signs. But if you've got a handful of those, it doesn't have to be all of them. There's some in there that I'm like, no, that's not me. But there's a handful of these that I was like, without a doubt. And what I did is, even though I have worked hard because I used to live in this state often, I've worked very hard to make sure that I'm aware of it and I do all the things. But again, this is the first time in my life that I've had this heavy of a load with school, podcasting, work, volunteer hours, like regular life, all the things. And just juggling that on an hour to hour basis, sort of thing. But again, where I was like, you're doing that thing of like, you just got to get through this year. Well, yeah. But again, I don't know what my life's going to look like after these things. Life is life and regardless, right? And so it's one of those things where, and I'm sure as hell not going to just go, oh, well, that's going to be that. And then create myself an illness at the end of this shit because so you kind of go like, well, before I go on to what are some of the things that we can do from here, what are your kind of thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, I just relate to it a lot, honestly, especially when you talk about qualities within yourself that start to shift that don't feel like you. The cynicism, like all of a sudden your reactions to people. And I think at some point you realize like that this doesn't feel like me is a huge one. And you can't really shake it when you're in it either. Like, I think when I was still working in television, I obviously ended up in such a state of overwhelm and burnout at that point. And I remember just having really emotional reactions to things that normally wouldn't come out of me, especially like angry, irritable reactions. And I would have interactions with other humans that I didn't feel good about after. And you would reflect and be like, that was all me. What the fuck? That doesn't feel like me. That's not me.
Right.
And then you really have to look at that because that's the thing. When you're in that state, like when you speak to the negative thought loops, no human self, because it's not really self at this point, your ego's in like defensive mode. So you're just kind of like, well, surely it's the rest of the world. Fuck them. Like to actually
isn't it?
Lift the veil and be like, maybe it's me. Maybe I need to change how I'm doing things. 100%. Like that's out of all the things, it's the out of character moments. And you kind of convince yourself that either your situation shifted But you have to remember that back to baseline is within you, but it is a choice. And to Lori's point, even how you let us all into this conversation, there is everything pulling from you from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed that is trying to pull you away from that sense of baseline and that sense of alignment. And so you are battling that on top of having to build in your own awareness, on top of having to choose yourself and choose the work. And it's not like we're saying that you need to live your year of being like, I'm shutting everyone out and da da da. No, these life audits are so important. Like I remember writing you, Lori, when you communicated this. And I was like, yes, I distinctly remember when I went inward with intention and what the reward was on the other side was so grand and great. So I'm like, there is that flip side where you are re-energized, but I think you've also elevated vibrationally into the next space. And that is why you're like, ooh, I have an energy boost because you've not just ended up in a baseline, the bar has raised.
That's it. It's the truth because you've learned more things about yourself and you've created another tool in your tool belt. And you like I said about the like, oh, I feel that need and that pull to show up in this way. And what's that about to that extent? Like it's, it shouldn't be this uncomfortable for me to exist and stuff like that. And so it's just that is like, it's not just about getting back to the homeostasis. Yes, that's what we want. That's where to live. But the biggest bonus is just your growth as a human and having more understanding of like how it is that it's upgrading your programming. You know what I mean?
I think almost like, and this will date us because no one does this anymore, but you're in your like first car and it definitely has a radio with a dial tuner. And it's like you find the perfect station, right? And then at some point you go somewhere and it's static and you're kind of like, but I like this station, but I got to move on because it's not coming through crystal clear. And you got to fiddle around a little bit till you figure it out. Then finally you can have shit come in crystal clear. But if you do not make the space, you are not going to allow the next evolution to come in. You become a blocker. To be honest, the static just gets worse and worse, and you're convincing yourself maybe it'll come back into tune. And you're like, no, it's you're just hearing a little like, it makes your brain go crazy. You want to just be like, well, then shut the fuck up. But I'm like, that's the biggest part for me where I'm just kind of like, if you don't intentionally create the space, you will never allow what's next to come in. And more than likely what's going to happen if you keep putting into practice what you're already doing that has put you there, life is going to get more and more uncomfortable. And unfortunately, if you are under that mask of cynicism, I dare say the further you get in it, the harder it is to actually have the awareness around it. Because I think you just end up in that tunnel of negativity and it becomes so easy for your ego to take over and say, it's that person, it's this situation, it's this, end up a victim of your own circumstance that you have to take accountability for because it seems really morbid to say, but it's true. No one is coming to save you in this life. Like you may have the most incredible people around you, but as Lori said, if they're the only fuel to your well-being, that is codependence. And really your internal structure is just janky scaffolding. You gotta
because you're always reliant to your outside environment. It's a really big thing now more than ever. And people kind of are like, oh, I'm not a victim. It's real. It happened. And you're like, the victimhood doesn't come because you haven't had these real experiences. They are real. They were hard. They were, all the things, the stuff that's happening on a day to day, they are hard. They are real. But they are ultimately yours to decide what you're going to do with them. Because if we were all at the mercy of the outside world and our happiness, our well-being, our rest, or all those things, well, why? Why bother? We're just like, why bother? You're at the mercy. It's just not the truth. And that's the thing too, is like, with that, when we're not listening to self and we're not creating the space, whenever that person does that thing and says that thing, or the thing didn't work out, or that thing happened, or this, everything is like, well, I feel this way because of them or what happened. and you go, okay, now what are you going to do about it? That was the biggest shift in my life by a landslide, was recognizing nothing's actually happening to me unless I believe it so.
Yes.
And when I shifted to everything is happening for me, even the hardest of moments, suddenly the empowerment was mind blowing. Suddenly I was moving through this life quicker, faster, lighter, happier, more joyful.
100%. You know, when you were talking about that codependency and relying on other people or allowing other people to really dictate that, obviously I think of the emotional energy I was expending earlier this year, and people were seeing me unravel, and I knew I was unraveling, but I'm like, if I'm not the linchpin that keeps this person together, like, they're going to fall apart. And to be honest, I should have just let them fall apart because I was blocking them from their own personal growth. And when I was finally able to let that go, and I do want to say, like, through my entire dissolution of my marriage, I was really in this, like, trusting I was exactly where I was supposed to be and leaning into the work in all corners because of everything Lori and I have put into practice and because of doing that vulnerability work. But what I can say, to your point of moving through things faster, am I a fully healed human? Of course fucking not. The work continues. No one's a fully healed human at any point in time. And I'm continuing the work. I feel so elevated and happy right now. I'm going to therapy today. Like, all of that still continues, the groundwork maintenance. But what I can say is that the magnitude and the juice in this upswing of the valley is so fucking worth it. And when I was in it, this part's the part that's almost impossible to see, even though you know it's there. And I know, Lori, you went through it through obviously like the horrific and heart-wrenching time with Auntie last year, and then being in the deep throes of grief. And I remember the walks that we went on and the overwhelm as well when you have emotional expenditure due to outside circumstances that are happening to you. Because that's the thing. We're not just talking about the busyness of work responsibilities and things like that. Life is about exchange of energy. And sometimes there are things in our lives that are extracting energy. But the thing is, energy is boundless. We have the opportunity of what energy am I going to invite? What fuel am I going to put in? Are you going to put diesel in a gas? No. Are you going to fill up with fucking premium? Well, that's a choice. But premium's going to cost you a little more. You got to do the work if that's what you're going to put in the tank.
Yeah. If people, you really have to recognize that it's like, we can't, our girl Nikki said this, and I'm pretty sure I said this on a different episode, is like, you can't work harder for people than they're willing to work for themselves. And when you are at a space and place of depletion, you have to understand that there are interactions with loved ones that take your energy, and there are interactions with loved ones that give you energy, both of you. And you might have to make also boundaries in regards to how you'll participate in a relationship. Because that's what we kind of think is like, I just have to get rid of this relationship. And you're like, no, not necessarily. You know, I always talk about that 2080. It's like one of those things that, again, where it becomes an imbalance of where the relationship has healthy moments, that's always going to evolve as well. Like some of my what I participate in as far as like my contribution, I think venting can be a healthy thing if you're looking for an outcome at it at the end. If you're like, well, what can I do differently? How can I approach this? This is what's frustrating. This is where I don't know what to do within, you know, like your relationships, and venting to a safe space. I say safe because I think if you're venting to somebody that isn't a safe person with that information, that's not fair to the person that you're venting about. Also, are you venting in a way that's going to help you change your action and or be more clear about a conversation you're going to have with the actual person? Where it becomes unhealthy is when you're just ruminating either with somebody or alongside somebody. And there's no actual, what am I going to do? Where's my accountability? Where are we going from here? And you're just complaining. And you're just, and that's a part where I'm like, oh, yeah. And that's even something where I'm like, in your relationships, where are you participating just unconsciously that you walk away feeling more depleted and there is numerous examples that I have of this in my life that I am doing, that I'm the person that's doing it, and also where I'm the person being a participant with or just an observer with. And it is depleting me. But I had more energy 9 months ago, so it wasn't a big deal. it was on my radar. I was like, I don't love it, but I'm also like, it's not enough of a thing to give a fuck about enough to do something.
And the whispers got louder till it was like, you're
yes,
gonna give a fuck now.
And now that and I'm going to need more energy where I'm going, and so now I'm getting more and more clear of like, that can't take place anymore. I can't participate in that. And that's also part of your boundaries. It's not just about like saying no to people when they ask things and want to do things. And you're like, I don't have it in me. I got to say no. It's also about being like, where within context do you need to clean up your side of the fucking street? And when you need to say, I'm sorry, I just swept this part. I'm not going to allow the garbage to come on this side of my street. But like, you know, have it, do your side of the street, you know, as much as you want. You do, because at the end of the day, boundaries aren't about what you're asking of other people. It's about what you're willing to participate in.
And if you are playing the street, you can have a street party after.
Oh, right. What a great time. And so, and let's just talk about that of like, what are some of the things? One of them is like, recognize, first of all, really be honest with yourself. Be really honest with yourself. If you are depleting, if you are feeling run down, if you are feeling like you are ignoring whispers? Are you ignoring this? And then where can you take accountability? Because at the end of the day, that is the only way change is going to happen. But at the core of it, you are the only one. You are the only one that can hear yourself, hear what you need, and look at your life and decide what the fuck are you going to do about it to reclaim your time and energy. I cannot stress that enough. You are the only one that can reclaim that for yourself. That's it. You are you. You are the only one that can hear you, know your life, know what you need. Fucking listen. Like, I just am desperately for your well-being. I don't say that as a criticism or a mean thing. I say that as your inner self being like, fucking listen to me.
Fucking listen.
As in your, you know, yourself. They are begging that of you. Mm-hmm. They are begging that of you.
You genuinely, if you get quiet enough, you know that. Your knowing knows. So to your point, Lori, yeah, you're not being critical or anything like that. You are highlighting the knowing fucking knows. You know when you're ignoring the knowing. Fucking listen.
Fucking listen.
That point, listen to this.
Motivation. I feel like we should actually get a little jingle down, like practice a jingle.
Oh, that'd be fun.
And have a jingle.
We really should. It should be.
And then people are going to get it caught in their head.
Yes. We should have like a couple like genre versions, like today's folk. This is rap. Well, you know what? We will take that offline. Lori's out, and I'm like, we're going to.
I was like, that's what we need is adding a bunch of jingles we're going to write and practice as. I'm like, no more on my plate. Yeah, let's write some jingles. You know what I'm in? Like, this is how much you have to be aware. Because when you're in ideas, folks, like Chrissy and I, you really have to be like, shut it down. Oh, now's not the time for ideas.
I know you're going to have something super insightful, and mine is more like a high level obvious that you could just do today. Because this is something that's been exceptionally helpful to me, to Lori's point, when we talk about social media and those demands on our attention. And obviously they are intentional and they're really designed to just like keep the money machine moving. I do a lot of my work in the social space, every single platform. So I have to be highly conscientious, and I get caught in the trap from time to time. It's actually funny because I'm like, my friends, if they do ever post, probably, I mean, I doubt people look this far into it, but I'm the asshole because I rarely end up liking the shit because I actually don't consume as much as I contribute in social media. Mainly because I'm like, I can't go down that rabbit hole. I don't want to spend more time there. But my point is like, think of even messaging apps you have. You've got your iMessage. Maybe you're on WhatsApp too. Maybe you're on other platforms. Maybe because of work, you also have Slack, and that could be pinging. Every single app or element that you download on your phone asks you, enable notifications. The simple question, enable those push notifications, turn them the fuck off. Turn them off. I promise you, if somebody is in a dire situation, they will call you. Like the emergency mode will end up coming through. They're probably on your emergency contact list. There is more than likely nothing in your phone, no email, no thing that needs to demand your attention this fucking minute. That one simple action and removing that constant draw, because as Lori said, like there are things happening in the brain if you leave that on, and then you're seeking that dopamine hit, and then that becomes a habit. If you actually add the minutes in your day that it interrupts you and pulls you into something else, it's substantial.
Yes.
So
Yes.
to me, I'm like, that's like one thing you can actually put into practice today. And maybe you're like, but I need to know when my work email pings. Fine. Like eliminate notifications from 2 of your apps. And I guarantee it's going to save you a bunch of time. And then try and be as intentional as possible when you are in consumption mode. I'm not saying, as somebody that builds platforms in social spaces, I'm certainly not telling you to not go there because I wouldn't have a job. But I'm like, be intentional about it,
Mhm.
because everything is designed for you to not think about it and it be this subconscious habit. And I would say most humans at this point, due to our addiction to our phones, are operating in that way. And myself included a lot of the time. Like as Lori and I say all the
Mhm.
time, we are not like these I mean, I'm like, I'm a goddess, but I'm like, we're not these like godly gurus that have figured it all out. We're fucking up
No.
all the
Good
time.
Lord.
But I'm like, this is why we do this, to like remind ourselves. It's like, how many times have I said things on this podcast? I'm like, right. I should probably do that for myself. But now Lori's going to jump in with something well thought out and insightful. I just know it.
Oh, here's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to say them very quickly. But ways to prioritize. Ways to put it into practice. Like we said, recognize the signs, listen to your motherfucking self. Prioritize breaks, rest, and recovery. Again, that could be 3 minutes of just sitting quietly or laying down. It does a boatload for your brain and body. Do not underestimate the power of a couple of minutes. Set boundaries around your time with and energy with people, activities, and what has access to you. Say no. Be in the discomfort of what comes with it. We did an episode on it prior. Be okay with being misunderstood. But boundaries are so important. Again, that's not what you need other people to do. It's what you yourself are going to do. And it's create the non-negotiables for yourself and stick to them, because you're going to find excuses to want to back out of your boundary. Reconnect with your why. What is important to you? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Because if you're putting this much energy and this much time into your day, what are you moving towards? What is this all for? Ultimately, what is the values of this? And then if what doesn't match up with that, get gone, get it out of there. You know, if it doesn't align, it's not worth your time or energy, because it's not going to move you to your end result of ultimately what you want in your life, whether that's personal, professional. Well, it should be all the above incorporated. Mm-hmm. Practice self-care as much as possible. No, that doesn't, it can be a bath, but it can also just be going in and like, sometimes I'll just rinse my body, put my hair in a ponytail, rinse my body just to have a refreshed feeling, to have a little bit of a rejuvenation, whether that's reading 5 minutes of a book that's like non-learning, that's just like fiction or something that just activates the brain, maybe coloring, like it might be sitting just quietly, but invest in the care of self, invest in that. And then the other is just reach out for support. Now, it's one of those things where I spoke about my reach out for support is being clear with my people, but I need that chosen isolation with intention. But yours might be the isolation because you need to create space to hear yourself, but also share with people that you are feeling that way, so that, and then be very clear of how they can help. If you're a parent, where can, a grandparent, a friend, an auntie, an uncle, like what can they take off your plate? If you're just a person in general, that it's like, what can somebody take off of your plate at this given time, or potentially forever? If you're just like this, and also this isn't mine to carry, have this back. Hand back the things to the people that need to carry it themselves. Stop doing the lifting, heavier lifting. It's like the little kid that's like, my backpack, so have a carry it for me. Our friends do that too sometimes, not with intentional. That's not their intention, but it happens. Family members do it often for many people. And you get to say, I'm sorry, that's not mine to carry. There you are. Be comfortable being misunderstood. Be comfortable saying no. Find your new happy medium. It will forever change. Constantly be in a state of evolution with it. And like Chrissy and I said, you will. And it is really the only way to go, not only be well as a whole human, but on the other side of that, evolve into the next version of yourself that's going to take on the next things that are coming down, opportunities, because you can't show up for your life or the next version of your life and all the things that you want for yourself with the stagnated version you've got right now. It's just not a possibility. And I know that about myself. I'm like, this version of myself couldn't take on the next evolution of my goals, but I'm moving into her. I'm moving into her.
I have to add to that. If you are somebody that keeps finding yourself in the same place over and over, that is a sign that it's not life being like, why does it keep fucking handing me this card? It is life saying, I'm giving you a lesson here, but you're going to have to take the course. And if you don't, you will not have that next evolution of yourself, because it's going to keep handing it to you. And again, it can be one of those matters where you deflect all the things. But I'm just like, if you find yourself circling back to the same destination, that is a pretty healthy sign of like, there is some work to do. But if you dig into that, fuck, man, the magic when you like enter and you are aware that you are this new evolution of yourself, it's pretty fucking spectacular, and it's all for the fucking taking.
I couldn't agree more with that statement. I could not agree more. And you and I are we're not saying this from a state of, regurgitating some self-help shit. We have gone to the trenches with that.
Deep trenches.
and bumbled and,
so I got so fucking dirty, scraped, cut. I was like, naked at some point.
Blood, sweat, and tears, literally and figuratively. And so we're saying that with the utmost love and empathy for whoever is in a space and place where they are in the same spot, and it is over and over. But once again, listen, allow, do the hard stuff. And it's you, it's all you, and you've got this. It can be different in itself. Just even knowing that it can be different is like a spark. And let go to the dark spaces that holds. But it's a light. You come out in a light that you're just like, okay, all right, yeah, okay, I get it. That's worth it. That's why I'm so quick now to be like, there's hard shit. And I'm like, oh, kind of excited.
Right.
Yeah. Now I kind of get excited because I'm like, ooh, shit's going to be cool on the other side of this. But like, oh, I want to puke right now. Yeah. It's me on the couch with like feeling nauseous about setting new boundaries. And then I'm like, well, it's going to get cool after this though. Hey, oh yeah.
When it comes to a quote, I'm just going to like hand down what I said already. And it's very profound. Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Mine is choose where your energy goes before the world and everyone in it chooses for you.
And that, my friends,
is your motivation.
You've just listened to the Motovation Podcast. Thanks for joining us along the ride. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at the Motovation Podcast and hit like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And remember, full tanks, full throttle.